if you ever are in West Lafayette, Indiana, make sure you stop by AJ's, which is off of Vine Street. The food is amazing. Now it's time for the interview. I'm so happy to be joined by Spike Cohen, who was the 2020 Libertarian vice presidential nominee. Some people would say that you were the bronze medalist in that competition. Take us through. A lot of people have heard the word libertarian. Few people have probably voted libertarian, though. What is a libertarian in your eyes?
I mean, I guess in a nutshell, libertarians think that you can manage your life better than some bureaucrat who will probably never meet you, and certainly better than some politician who has a vested interest in trying to convince you that you need them. Generally speaking, and I mean, you can unpack it as much as you want. In fact, libertarians often spend their entire lives arguing with other libertarians about whether or not they're true libertarians. So it's an endless rabbit hole if you want to go down it. But generally speaking, what that looks like is we want a government as small as possible. We want that governance to be as local as possible. We'd like decisions. If there has to be a government making decisions, we'd like it to be in our neighborhood, not 1,000 miles away. And generally, we think people should be able to be more free and be able to make decisions for themselves. I think that you can, generally speaking, make a better decision for yourself, knowing far more about your life and all of the inputs involved in that than a bunch of politicians and bureaucrats and enforcers, dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of miles away could do.
And obviously, we'll get into kind of viewpoints later on. But what was it like running during COVID, of course? Um, on the Libertarian ticket, obviously, we heard a lot of chatter in 2024. Oh, it's Kamala versus Trump. In 2016, oh, it's Hillary versus Trump.
Yeah.
In 2020, oh, it's Trump versus Biden. But obviously, there was very few debates, and the debates that we did have between presidential candidates in the general election or vice presidential candidates, the one debate the Libertarian and Green Party is not included on.
Yeah.
And what is it like campaigning in a setting like that, where you know that people know what the libertarian means, but there was no debate for you to talk about your ideas?
It often feels like being the tree that keeps falling in the woods and no one hears it. I mean, so just to put it in perspective, I traveled to close to 40 states and I was on the bottom of the ticket. My running mate, Joe Jorgensen, she visited, I think, over 40 states, and some of those states multiple times. Every day I was just about every day I was in a different state, almost always in a different city, talking to as many people as would come out, sometimes hundreds of people, sometimes more than that. And again, this was during COVID, so there was the added difficulty of travel restrictions and what states you can visit when you've already been to this state versus what states you have to visit another state first, or they won't let you in, and what mandates are in place and everything else there. So there was that additional difficulty of doing that. And yet, many people had no idea that we were doing that. I actually ran a far more physically active campaign in terms of actual travel than either the Republican or the Democrat did during most of that race. And yet, most people had no idea what was happening because, as you said, we were not included in the debates. We often weren't even included in the polls, the opinion polls, even though you have to, in order to be able to be included in the debates, you have to get 15% or more in three or more reputable opinion polls. But then they don't include you in the polls. So even if we were to get 15%, you wouldn't know because we weren't mentioned in the polls. So it's sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy every cycle that, well, these candidates can't win, so we're not going to mention them. And of course, if you never mention them, the odds of them not winning goes up even more. And so yeah, I mean that's really the long and short of running as a third party candidate. It's a big part of why after that campaign I am less and less involved with electoral politics and more involved with actually like finding people who need help and leveraging social media to help them now, which is what I do with You Are the Power. But because until the system changes, it's effectively impossible to be able to win a race. And it's not for nothing that since these changes have been put in place about 100, well over, about just over 100 years ago, that there hasn't really been a third party that's won any federal races, or
which
very few anyway.
you're absolutely right about. And, obviously we don't have a parliamentary system, but
Right.
even in Canada or the UK, you have like a Green Party there or a Reform or whatever, or constitutional that typically gets like 4 to 5 seats in a parliamentary race. Obviously, Congress works different than that in ways,
Right.
but you don't even on when it comes down to congressional elections in any state, you're lucky to maybe get 10% at best if you're a libertarian or green person, at best.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even when there was some ranked choice voting in Alaska or New York City, it still didn't really work out that way to benefit somebody that would be a third party. So, like Andrew Yang's version, it was still more for primary change, like the Democratic primary in New York City. They used ranked choice voting, did it in 2021, 2025, but it didn't really do anything in the general election for a libertarian.
And that speaks to the second and probably bigger problem with running as a third party candidate. Even if we make those changes, the vast majority of voters believe you can't win. And again, that becomes self-fulfilling. If we see all these opinion polls where people say they want a viable third party, they're sick of just having to choose between Republicans and Democrats, but when the rubber hits the road and they may even know that there are third party candidates running, and they may even agree with one of those third party candidates more than the Republican or Democrat candidates, but more often than not, they like the Democrat more than the Republican, or they like the Republican more than the Democrat. And like is probably the wrong word. They fear the Democrat less than the Republican, or vice versa. They fear the Republican less than the Democrat. And so they say something like, well, this election is far too important to vote third party. And maybe next time I'll do it. And that next time never comes because the Republicans and Democrats have learned, and this is why they do so much negative campaigning and why they focus on just constantly pointing out each other's hypocrisy, is that if they can make it so that you feel like this is an existential question, that the country and possibly ourselves cannot survive another 2 years or 4 years or whatever of the party that we don't like in charge, well, then the idea of voting third party is a non-starter. And so again, it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. If the majority of people believe that a third party can't win, well, then a third party can't win. And if a third party can't win, then people are more likely to believe they can't win. So it's really an uphill battle, especially with any first past the post system. But even with ranked choice voting and things like that, people just it's a lot of conditioning that's built in that a lot of voters have that third parties can't win. You mentioned Canada. Canada actually has a first past the post system. They do have a parliamentary system, but they pick their what they call MPs, members of parliament, at the riding level. So they vote for their party. They vote for their candidate, and then their candidates, whichever party wins, then decides who the prime minister is. But technically, their system at the what they call the riding level, what we call the congressional level, the district level, it's still the same in terms of you have to decide who you want. But there's just more of a tolerance up there for the idea of having more than two parties to pick from.
Definitely. And you see it on there where maybe the winner gets 30% because some third party, not conservative or labor, ends up getting, winning at 31% because some independent or Green Party guy gets 15%. You would never
Yep.
see that in the congressional race. And then sometimes there's two or three people in the environmental party or the Green Party that win. And you got that Thomas Massey figure in Parliament.
Well, and as a result of that, again, the opposite reinforcing, you've seen in the last, 20, 30 years, the three main top parties there, the NDP, the Liberals, and the Conservatives, they've formed their governments at different times. I think it's been a while since NDP has done it, but in the last like 20, 30 years, all three of them have done that. And so in the minds of a Canadian voter, it's not unreasonable to think that one of those three parties can win, and then by extension that other parties could also potentially win. And so it's just a different mindset there. So I think a lot of it is in the American mindset. Generally speaking, the American voter just doesn't really have much appetite for a third party candidate, which is again why I came out of that election realizing long before we're ever going to be able to get elected president, we're going to have to change a lot of minds. And I think even more to the point, it's possible that may never happen. So if libertarians have this world that we want to see happen, and we have ideas that make sense to people, maybe we can get some of them done without having to actually get a Libertarian Party member elected. And that idea was sort of the beginning of what ended up leading to You Are the Power. You Are the Power is a nonpartisan organization. We work with people of all different political parties, and we're not actually involved in elections in any way. We work on grassroots level local organizing for specific individuals and families who are being harmed by corrupt local politicians and bad government policy. So we don't get involved in elections or campaigns or candidates. And the reason I kind of a big part of why I shifted towards that was because I'm like, yeah, we're never going to, or at least the likelihood of us happening of us actually winning as third party candidate, it's like it's almost non-existent. We've gotten hundreds of local elected officials elected, but once you go past that, it's almost impossible.
Definitely. And what's a policy that, if you had to pick a favorite touchy subject, what policy are you most passionate about that makes you identify as libertarian?
That's a hard one to pick because libertarianism is kind of this like a holistic way of looking at government. You don't really necessarily look at a specific thing. I would say if I had to pick a specific policy, well, I mean, you look at the government control of currency, and it's funny because people will hear that and go, not war, not healthcare, not things that are harming everyday people, but it that's the root of all of it. When the government controls currency, uh, the value of that currency is now determined on political objectives. Well, the ultimate political objective of a government is to be able to spend as much money as it possibly can. And the best way for them to be able to do that is to print out endless reams of money to be able to borrow again, to be able to basically lend to themselves and then spend endlessly. They stick you with the cost of that to pay it back with interest, and it reduces the value of that currency because they keep printing out more and more of it, which actually helps them because that means the value of their debt is less as well. And so they can just keep endless. So from their perspective, this is great. We just keep endlessly printing out money. It artificially inflates the economy, makes it look like the economy is doing well because it keeps going up. More money's being spent, more money's being spent. But to you and me and to average everyday people, what it looks like is the cost of everything going through the roof. That's why they call it inflation. It is the inflation of the monetary supply, the amount of money that's in circulation that leads to the inflation of the price of everything. It's not that those things are becoming more valuable. It's that the money that you have to use to buy those things is becoming less valuable. And then it's that ability to endlessly spend money that allows the government to engage in endless wars overseas and endless harmful spending and endless it's how the government's able to spend hundreds of billions of dollars to spy on every single one of us, something that none of us would ever be willing to pay taxes for at that level. But they don't really have to come to us and say, hey, you got to pay this money for it. They just run up the debt and to pay for it, and then they tell you later you got to pay off the debt. So at its core, I would say if I had to pick one thing, it's government control of currency that is probably the root of so much of the harm that's done by government at multiple levels.
Appreciate you sharing that. And something you mentioned was endless wars. A big one that comes to mind, and there's obviously peace things going on
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
as we're recording this in Israel is you are a Messianic Jew, if I'm correct.
So it's funny you had
I'm pretty
mentioned that.
curious about that because
Yeah, yeah, no,
I love hearing other people's perspective and your upbringing and like
yeah.
obviously you believe in Christ, so
Yeah. So I was raised, what I was told was Messianic Jew. My father grew up Jewish and converted to Christianity. And so I was told we were Messianic Jews because we were Jews who believed in Jesus. Turns out, Messianic Judaism they are Jews who believe in Jesus, but they don't stop being Jews. And not just like culturally or ethnically, they continue to keep Torah law. Very often they're much more, they're almost like Orthodox Jews because they are very stringent on keeping Torah law and things like that. They eat kosher. They're fastidiously making sure that they still keep all the high holidays and things like that. We never did that. So we were more of a, I would call it a Jew-scented, Judaism-scented non-denominational Christianity, more so than truly Messianic Judaism. We were ethnic Jews who believed in Jesus, but we weren't actually religious Jews who believed in Jesus, if that makes sense. So I actually attend a Lutheran church now. So I've stopped referring to myself as a Messianic Jew. I'm a Christian. So yeah, ethnically I'm half Ashkenazi Jewish, but I'm actually a Christian.
So they can't be mad at me for this podcast then.
No, well, they shouldn't be mad at you anyway, but yeah.
And how has that shaped your view on Israel, if you don't mind me asking, and kind of everything going on there?
I mean, I'll tell you, man, Israel is a modern secular state. Like when we talk about Israel now, it is a state that was founded for the political purpose of having a homeland for Jewish people. Within and in the context of after many years of genocides and pogroms and things like that, that there was this political goal. And you can say there was a religious aspect to it as well. Obviously, I'm not denying that, but it was ultimately a political goal with political aims and a political means of doing so. And so when you read the biblical Israel, I'm going to say I'm still very early on in learning scripture. So actually, I taking a step back for a moment, I had a very long time of unbelief. I gave my life to Jesus back last November. And so for the past several months, I've been studying very heavily in the Bible, which was something I'd never done before. And so much of what I thought I knew as a Christian or Messianic Jew or whatever was just stuff other people said. It's amazing what happens when you actually start reading the Bible for yourself and realizing so much of that was just stuff that people made up. But with all that said, there are a lot of different debates within Christendom of how the modern state of Israel relates to the biblical Israel as stated in the Bible, and whether Israel is referring to the Jewish people, whether Israel is referring to those who are under God, and as Christians we would say that you can't have the Father without the Son. And so Israel in that context now refers to us as Christians. There are some that say, well, no, it depends on which parts of the Bible you're talking about. Israel sometimes refers to the Jewish people. Sometimes it refers to the land. Sometimes it refers to those who are in Christ. I will say I'm going to be somewhat neutral on that because I'm still learning it. As it relates to the issue of, I guess, the geopolitical question of Israel and Palestine and the Middle East in general, I'm going to take a step back from having as much of a faith-based way of looking at it as much as just looking at it from the standpoint of the Constitution and the founders of our nation did not want us to engage in nation building. They did not want us to have entangling alliances. They would have looked at our current US policy and said this is the literal opposite of what we wanted. And so I would say, as it relates to that, I would say I don't want the government involved. I think the U.S. government should not be involved. I will say that I'm glad if it was involved, it was involved to try to negotiate a peace, and hopefully it's a lasting one. We'll see what happens there. But in general, I don't think that we should be involved in overseas conflicts that aren't directly related to us. And I think in general, we should have far less of a forward and aggressive posture in terms of foreign policy and military policy around the world. Outside of that, I'm still very early on in my learning about how to apply theological, my theological beliefs to modern geopolitical and things like that.
Great to hear your perspective, and obviously, a lot of people would try to give an answer even if they haven't read everything yet. So,
Yeah.
be honest on that. And
Yeah,
then,
absolutely.
last question is, where can people go to find out more about You Are the Power?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they go to youarethepower.net, they can find out all about it. And a long story short of what we do, we help protect people who are having their lives ruined by corrupt local officials and bad government policy at the local and state level. That looks like people who are having their homes stolen from them, because using eminent domain or abusing the zoning bylaws because local officials want to steal their property and use it for something else. We get involved and that ends. It looks like people who have been arrested for things that are absolutely bogus. They didn't do anything wrong. It's on video that they didn't do anything wrong, but the local officials are still pushing ahead with doing it because they see that person as a political obstacle. We get involved, we get those charges dropped, and sometimes those officials resign. It looks like completely innocent parents with chronically ill children who are being accused of abusing their children, even though all the medical evidence shows no sign of abuse, and it shows that the child's injuries are being caused by actual like an illness like Ehlers-Danlos or some kind of connective tissue disorder or something, or bone disorder or something like that. And they're having their children taken from them, and they're being railroaded in court because that's how these state CPS agencies get their federal funding, by accusing as many parents of abuse as they possibly can. We get involved in those children are returned, their charges are dropped, and often, in fact, what just happened in Georgia, we actually got a law passed that fixes a lot of the problems that allow that to happen in the first place. So that's what we do at You Are the Power. And if people would like to be involved, then go to youarethepower.net.
Amazing. Well, Spike, I appreciate you joining the show today,
Absolutely. Thank you.
and can't wait to see if there ever is a third party one day, because that would be a good thing for this country and any society to have more than just two parties on the ballot in any country.
Yeah, absolutely. With anything, it's better to have as many choices as possible. So hopefully so. But thank you again for having me on, and God bless you.